What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now, Back to the Past. I'm Alex, and in this video, I want to go back to Mirror's Edge. I'll tell you what started this, and it's actually EA's fault. I'm actually glad that it happened, but it's still their fault. So, a few weeks back, they talked about delisting games, right? And that Bad Company, the Battlefield Bad Company games, along with one other, is going to be removed from the store. Now, in that press release, they also said Mirror's Edge. Mirror's Edge was going to be removed from, you can't purchase it, right? So unless you got that physical edition or anything of that such, you're screwed. You're absolutely screwed. So I saw that and I was like, dear God, how could you do something? And also, why does Mirror's Edge have anything to do with Battlefield? You think, okay, multiplayer, maybe that's why it's being delisted or, deplatformed off the thing. Why is Mirror's Edge? And then they said, oh, that was a mistake. Mirror's Edge, that wasn't supposed to be in there. Now, let me tell you, I do feel like that is a push that Mirror's Edge is next. I don't think they did that completely on accident. So I thought, okay, I don't actually own this game physically. I actually need to get on that to get it physically. But let's go back and let's play this game. It's on their EA game service, whatever. You can actually get it free if you have Game Pass, right? Because of that EA partnership. So I played this game for free, went back into it. Now I'll tell you, when I originally played Mirror's Edge, well, number one, I did not play it in 2008. And number two, I barely played it. This was a game that I knew about, and I knew about going in to Mirror's Edge Catalyst, which I actually did play much more. I really don't like that game, and I'm very much considering making a whole video on this channel on that game, because what a way to ruin a sequel, at least in my opinion. Mirror's Edge has always been, I think, a cult classic. I've always liked it, but again, never really like experiencing the full thing. And I actually was more interested and more like willing to go into Mirror's Edge Catalyst back in the day. And then again, that disappointed me. So I jumped back in. I played Mirror's Edge, start to finish. Let me talk you through a couple things. Number one, the game's actually extremely short. I didn't clock myself, so I don't know how long it was, but it had to have been, oh man, I'd say like probably under 7 hours. I'd say probably in that 5 to 7 hour range. Very short, but let me tell you, short but sweet, and not overstaying its welcome, getting in, getting out. I mean, whatever phrase you want to use, that's what this game does. And I appreciate it. Now, you spend $60 or, whatever you want to say. Was it worth it back in 2008? Well, I guess I don't know. I don't know that for sure. But I can tell you now, I guess even playing it for free, because I still haven't bought it yet, I can probably get it physically for like $5. I was checking like Mercari and the eBays of the world. I'll get it for cheap, and I will get this game. This game's awesome. Okay, I really do love this game. There are some flaws, and it's like, why in God's name did you do some of these things? But it holds up. I'm dead serious. It holds up remarkably well. The actual parkouring that Faith does in this game is so good. And I mean, like, I would talk about like visuals, but it's odd because obviously, first person. So you're not seeing Faith actually like bounce around these things. But the way that miraculously works is incredible because you feel it. The camera is so good. It gets a little confusing of like where to go, right? You have to press B or I guess circle if you're playing on PlayStation. You can hold that button and the camera will direct you to where you're supposed to go. But it kind of gives you the freedom, right? Like some things will light up red, but not everything. Like sides of buildings or sides of just these small little jumps that you can make, sometimes they won't. You'll just have to run up and jump and do it for yourself. So the hand holding that is there, but also kind of disappears at times, I actually really liked. And look, the core of this game is the feel. The core of this game is parkouring and running around and making those gigantic leaps and rolling at the last second and having the camera react. It is so good. And I'm serious. I mean, this is 15, I think it came out in November, so it's like 14 and a half years old. Almost a 15-year-old game. I think if you were to remake it, and I'll have to replay Catalyst, I don't know what you change. I don't know what you change about the actual fluidity of it, right? Now, you could add to it. Obviously, you can change the combat, which they did, and the combat in this game is not very good. But the core of what this game is good at, it is still, I feel like, flawless in the sense that it feels just as good now. If you gave me a game that had that kind of parkouring and I guess floatiness, but also kind of weight, right? Because she'll kind of like grab twice and then like actually get a hold of something. The way it maneuvers itself is so good, and it really hasn't aged like at all. Now, other things have, right? But honestly, this game also has a visual appeal that I'm sure it will continue to age because there are some like legitimate cutscenes or kind of in-game cutscenes where you're like picked up from like a boss and thrown. You can see facial features and stuff, and obviously those have aged massively. But overall, it's a game that relies on white a lot. Like there's a lot of like white lights in this game, and you know, a lot of the textures are like just kind of simplistic, like almost if you open an engine, like you wanted to create your own game and you kind of just like dropped things in and you didn't really go too much into the details of them. That's kind of Mirror's Edge, and they kind of do it well. I mean, you even think of like the box art. Well, actually, you're seeing it behind me. Like those are what the buildings kind of look like, and I guess that could look like quote unquote bad or not detailed. Yes, they are not detailed, but honestly, you don't really need that because the theme with this game is don't stop moving. Now, this game does get in its own way sometimes, especially probably like the midpoint of this game. It starts to introduce you to the concept of putting you in like a room or putting you in a building, and it's a lot of puzzle solving of, okay, got to run along this wall to get to this thing to swing, and I got to get to this location. And I do think, you know, it's a tale of two kind of different games because when you're outside, when there's chases, your heart, I mean, my heart at least, my heart was like going when you have cops shooting at you, or I think they just call them like blues. And when you have like a helicopter chasing after you, there's a sense of urgency. There's a sense of movement. You want to move quick, and also the game requires you to move fast. You always have to be moving. When it takes that away from you and it says, well, we still want you to do the parkour stuff, but we want you to do it in a closed environment, the game suffers. It absolutely suffers. The core of this game, I really don't think has aged, and I still think is honestly like a masterpiece. But again, there are issues. It's not all just like the greatest game of all time. There's definitely problems with it. There's numerous times in a closed space where I couldn't figure it out, or it required something that was very, very strange. Like, I don't know how I ever would have thought to do something like that. There are some clever like puzzles in a sense of like maybe you don't always think to like run along a wall, or sometimes when you climb up or jump up and then you turn around and like play like a Assassin's Creed kind of thing. You don't always do that in the game, and you don't always think about it. So then when the game requires you to do it, you're like, ooh, I almost forgot Faith could even do that in the first place. You know what I mean? So there's times like that. The combat definitely is an issue. Now, here's the interesting thing. The combat is so floaty. It is bad. But I actually kind of like it in some degree. I think there is something kind of special to enemies having weird shooting patterns, and also enemies like just pausing for long periods of time, or, you know, they react really weird. You'll go in to punch them, you'll punch them like twice, and they'll fall back, and then they'll kind of hit you with their gun, and you have to dodge it, or you can slide and kick them. There's some pretty interesting parts to the combat, and I definitely don't hate it as much as I think it's gotten the reputation for being like god awful. You know, the gunplay is not, you know, anything really to say, oh, good job on, but at the same time, I didn't mind it too much. Here's what I did mind, okay? In the ending, the game decides it's an action game, okay? So literally I believe it's the last chapter. I think they're either chapter or acts in this game. I think they're chapters though. So in the final chapter, you're going around, and it literally requires you. So a lot of this game, you can run past enemies. Sometimes you have to fight them, but most times you can get around them. The last couple parts of this game, the last hour plus, you know, somewhere around that range, you have to take out groups of enemies. And again, the game is not really meant to do that. It's meant to, like I said, you're always supposed to be moving. Now, you kind of are moving when you're fighting, but it's not the same, right? I think that's kind of obvious thing to say. It's not the same kind of movement. So the game's at its greatest, at its best, when Faith is on the run and doing all these parkour things. It's not at its best when you're in a condensed room and you have to sneak up on one enemy, beat the heck out of them really quickly, get their gun, shoot the other enemies, which is really awkward, and then go from there. That's not the game's strength. And I think it knows that for most of the game. And then it just kind of decides, well, what if we made you do it anyway? What if this is literally the ending of the game? And then that's what you had. So, tale of two kind of different games. They definitely shouldn't have done that, but credit to them. From what I remember of Catalyst, although I didn't like the game, definitely the combat was something that I remember. That they even made videos of like, we're going to redo combat. It's not going to be like that. It's going to be like this. I remember seeing that for Catalyst, so there's at least that. The story in this game is actually pretty good. Like, I like Faith quite a bit. I like the actress. I like the story. There's a couple twists and turns. It's I don't know, like detective. Like, it's a little bit of a detective thing. It's also little bit of like a dystopian, like a, like things are not great in this city. It's almost like a martial law kind of thing. There's mayor candidates that one of them is promising kind of to like get the city out of this situation. And, there's assassinations and assassination attempts. Like there's some pretty cool stuff. So the story's not like in your face, but it's definitely there. It's why you're doing a lot of what you do in the game. And it's actually quite good. Like there's some pretty solid characters. Faith as a character is very good. I like the cutscene. So like, again, there's the in-game stuff, but then there's also, I don't even know what you want to call it, like the animated, almost like what you would see just on a TV animated show. And that is the majority of the cutscenes in this game. And I really liked it. Like it's very awkward at first where it's like, ooh, this is odd. But you know what? That kind of thing, visual, never gets old. So, I mentioned like a lot of this game I actually think is safe from like the aging process. Maybe the in-game cinematics are not safe from it, but a lot of the cinematics actually are. Look, all in all, very short, kind of short but sweet, but it gets you in and it gets you out. And there really is, there's nothing quite like it. I think that's what has always made Mirror's Edge very special. I think it's why it became a cult hit, in that you just play the game, and the parkouring and the way the camera reacts and the things you can actually do, the way Faith actually moves. And again, it's largely without seeing her do it, right? It's just the camera. You could technically not even have a person and you wouldn't even know it half the time. So I think that has always been something that people have really, really liked. I wish that they did a better job with Catalyst, which again, maybe we'll do a video on that soon. And also, like, I wish these games did better just in general. Now, look, Catalyst I just don't think is a great game, so it not selling well that's kind of the fault of the creators and all that. Whereas Mirror's Edge, the thing that sucks is Mirror's Edge never sold well. Like neither of these games ever sold well. It was actually, I feel like it was kind of a miracle that we even got a sequel in the first place, because so many people ask for more Mirror's Edge. But it's actually, we just talked in my last video, Alice Madness Returns, right? Not the same, definitely not the same, but similar vibe in the sense that I do think people want more Mirror's Edge. I think people think to this 2008 game and really like it, but the simple fact is it never sold well. And then when they made a new game, not only did that not sell well, but also it kind of was bad, whereas this game was not bad, right? So EA is in just a really weird spot. I don't know if we'd ever get a trilogy. Like the budget would have to be so low, or I don't know, they have to sell the rights to Mirror's, whatever would need to happen. But there's so much potential here. This game I do think is really good, and not even just from the gameplay side. I think some things that, again, people kind of despise are not as bad. They are pretty bad, but they're not like as bad. And then again, I think the story and even Faith as a character is pretty darn solid. So I had a lot of fun going back to replay this game. Let me know what you think in the comments. Make sure you guys are subscribed, bell icon turned on, and I'll see you all on the next one.